Hi, I'm Urmi, editor here at Move Smartly, and I'm here with my co-host John Pasalis of Realosophy Realty in Toronto. And we are doing our monthly The Situation episode, where we take a bit more time to respond to the more detailed questions we get from consumers across the Toronto area about home buying, selling, investing, and renting. How are you doing, John?
Very, very good. Looking forward to today's segment. We got quite a few questions over the past month, so should be interesting.
Yeah, we're channeling two moods here. You're still in the brights, gorgeous colors. It is still sunny outside. It's September, and
Yeah.
I'm looking like I'm transitioning a bit into editor black here. But maybe that also suggests, something about the market. There's a couple different moods going on at the same
A
time.
somber mood.
Some bright spots, some somber. Yes, yes. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So let's get into our questions.
Let's do it.
Our first one. Hi, John. We bought a new build condo in Toronto 3 years ago as an investment property. Now that it is completed, we find ourselves in a much different environment than the one we bought it in. When we bought, we had planned on renting it out to cover most of our monthly costs. But now, given high interest rates and high mortgage payments as a result, we'd have to rent it out at a loss of $1,200 a month, which we had not budgeted for. For this reason, we listed our condo for sale, but it has been 2 months on the market and we've had very few showings and no offers. Our selling agent is advising that we are priced fairly. What can we do to improve our chances of selling our condo in this slowing market? Thanks, Layla.
Wow, that's a good question. Where do I start with that? I mean, I'll start by saying that the one positive thing with Layla is that they were able to close on their condo. And what we're seeing on the ground right now with a lot of people who bought pre-construction properties, either houses or condos. And by closing, what I mean is, just to unpack that, a lot of people who buy pre-construction, the closing date comes, they're scheduled to take possession. What's happening right now is a lot of people who bought them pre-construction can't actually get a mortgage. And in some cases, they're having a hard time getting a mortgage because the property is worth less than what they paid for it. In other cases, they just don't qualify for the mortgage because at 6% interest rates, given their income, down payment, what other real estate they own, they actually can't get a mortgage. And this is why anyone who kind of follows the housing market may have heard sort of stories about the assignment market. So an assignment is when basically a owner of a pre-construction condo has a contract, they don't own the unit yet, and they're trying to assign or flip that contract to another buyer who will eventually close on it. And the assignment market is going pretty crazy right now because there's a lot of investors who bought pre-construction who don't have the means to close on them. So that's a bit of a tangent, and it's great that they were actually able to close on their unit because a lot of people are struggling right now and are trying to find someone else to basically take over their contract. On to her question, very understandable that mortgage payments, mortgage rates are making the numbers for rental condos not look as good. So understandable that they would want to obviously try to sell it if if they can't afford an extra $1,200 out of their own pocket to cover the difference between basically what the rent would be and what all of their carrying costs would be. On to her question, why aren't they selling? It's been 2 months. What can they do? So this is a challenge. This is a tricky question. I'd say like there's, maybe one of three things going on to think about. I mean, the first, of course, is, is the unit or the house, whatever it is, I mean, in this case, a condo presented well online, right? Are the photo, I mean, and this might sound silly, but I mean, the number of listings we see with photos that were taken with the agent's cell phone, I mean, it just looks terrible. So, you want some minimum, marketing to the unit. I mean, if it is an empty brand new unit, like virtually stage it if you don't want to actually stage it because staging is expensive. So some form of marketing that makes the unit look nice online, of course, is kind of number one. So those are the basic. In terms of pricing, I think it's important to You know, I always say this, you never want to just take your agent's word for stuff. You want to get comparables. And in this kind of a market, when you have and I think a lot of agents, quite frankly, are not used to markets like this where properties are sitting on the market for a very long time. So they're not used to doing the kind of work that you're supposed to be doing when you're in this business, helping someone sell, and it doesn't sell in 3 days the way we're so used to it. And you know what you have to do is look at everything that's hitting the market in your building in your area each week, looking at how many are selling, how quickly they're selling, what they're selling for. Because just because we were priced fairly 2 months ago, it may not mean you're priced fairly today, right? So, you know, this is this is a repeated exercise anyone has to do who has a property on the market, and it's basically looking at everything that's going on every week. I mean, a lot of times we even call other agents who have comparable properties to get feedback on their showings, on their offer nights for some people who are listing with low offers, just to get a sense of what's going on in the market. So you need to be constantly revisiting the price, not just assuming it's the right price, because, you know, unless you've seen what your neighbors or other people in your building have sold for over the past week or two, you may be overpriced and you don't know that, right? So I think pricing and making sure that you're kind of within the market is critical. Now, kind of the last part, of course, is, you know, stuff that's a little bit out of the seller's control, out of the agent's control, you know, and this really has to do with a market that's cooling down. I mean, there's a ton more inventory right now in the Toronto market. I think condos have close to 4 or 5 months of inventory, which is, I mean, incredibly high, you know, based on historical levels, which basically means, I mean, if you think about what 5 months of inventory means, it means if no new homes or condos hit the market, it would take 5 months for all of the current inventory to clear, right? We are used to 1 month of inventory, which is like, you know, condos selling very quickly or houses selling quickly, or a month and a half of inventory. So 5 months of inventory means that it is normal for properties to take much longer to sell, right? Now, the challenge is, especially if you're in a newer building, how many other condos are listed for rent in your building? Meaning, how many other similar new owners are in the same position? How many of those units are exactly like yours? You know what I mean? With the same layout. And what are they priced on? What floor are they on? And, you know, all of these factors matter. And, you know, in a slowing market, you know, a lot of times sellers, you know, wait it out and wait for people to bring them the price they want. But it also in a slowing market, especially when some people feel some financial distress, you know what I mean? Like maybe this couple or this person can handle, I mean, actually, if you actually do the math, they're probably paying now out of pocket, I don't know, 3,600 bucks a month between their mortgage and their property taxes and their maintenance fees because their unit's empty, right? If you think about it, because they're not getting the 1,200 assumes they're getting, say, 2,500 bucks a month in rent or whatever they were expecting. With no rental income for 2 months, it's sitting empty. They're paying out of pocket, you know, probably just under $4,000 to carry this property. Okay. Certain people can do that longer than others, right? So the challenge when you're a seller in this market is that to some extent, you're kind of vulnerable, you know, you're kind of dependent also on what other people do. So if your neighbor or someone a unit above from you gets desperate and sells their unit for $20,000 or $30,000 less than what you're priced at, that sort of puts some pressure on you to potentially reduce your price, because this is the comparable that most buyers are going to be looking at tomorrow. And I think this is a challenging time when you're selling. In some ways, your sale price depends on what other people are doing, right? And I think this is the challenge we have when we're advising clients. It's, you know, on the one hand, you know, you want to wait and you want to get for the best price, right? But if you wait too long, other people could just be pushing the price down on you potentially, right? And if that happens, then you just have to make a decision, like, is a certain price too low for you to sell it? And then do you just rent it? And is it better to be short 1,200 a month rather than, however many, tens or whatever it is that you might be selling below what you needs to maybe even break even? We don't know, right? So I think that's the challenge. And like in that part, there's no perfect answer. Like we can't, we can't tell our clients, you should be the one who sets the new low price. You know what I mean? Like that's their decision. On the flip side, if we're like, stay patient, they could just be pulled down with other people. You know what I mean? And of course, if everyone in their building or in their area is very patient and prices stick and they don't drop very much, that's their ideal scenario. But again, I think that starts becoming more challenging in the environment we have right now, because there's going to be some people who are just a little bit pressured, a little bit desperate, sell for a little bit less. And that's generally how housing markets kind of cool down. When, inventory builds up, buyer has tons of options, and one person just needs to unload it, and he doesn't, they don't care if it's $20,000 less than what their neighbor sold for 2 weeks ago, right? They just want to move on. So that's a long answer. But I hope I kind of unpacked, I think the things at least, sellers should be thinking about in this market.
You certainly did a lot to think about, and some really good concrete steps and ideas there. So I'm getting the sense, John, that those agents that are really conscientious in this market right now are working very hard for their clients. Is that fair to say?
100%. It's like, and this is like, it's so much more work now. But I mean, I'm not saying this to complain. This should be a normal market. Like most markets, homes don't sell in a week. You know what I mean? You don't just slap a for sale sign, you have 20 offers and your work's done in 7 days. This is what should it be a more typical market. Properties take longer to sell. And 100%, like agents should be regrouping every week, should be getting feedback every week, should be looking at what everything's selling, what everything's listed at. You don't just like sit back, list it, and wait for the offer. Like you're kind of like not reading the market that your client's in, and it's very local, obviously, right? Like you're not just looking at what's going on in the GTA, you're looking in that building, you're looking in that neighborhood. How many listings came up on the market? How many sold in the past month? Well, that alone is going to tell you. If you got like 20 listings in a building and only 2 sold in the past 30 days, there's a lot of inventory in that building, right? So, it's important to look at that stuff. And again, like a lot of this is, we can't control what other people do. We can't control the market. We can't control the prices. But like I said, half of this is just giving it to our clients so they can decide. You know what I mean? Like, so they can decide, okay, do we just take 20 grand less and sell and move on? Or, what, is it not worth it? Let's just rent it, and fine, we're out $1,200 a month, but that's better than, taking a cut that we don't want in the price, for example, right? And that's a very personal decision, depending on everyone's personal circumstances, finances, capacity to handle different scenarios.
Absolutely. And is it the case, John, that those investors who invested about this consumer invested 3 years ago, could it be that certain buildings are seeing this kind of risk among several sellers at once? So, it's not a coincidence that we're starting to see multiple units in particular buildings because of when they completed, and that the people that bought into the buildings, find themselves in a very different situation right now.
Yeah, very possible. Like if it's a newly completed building, I mean, usually when buildings are newly completed, you see like 100 new rental listings, in the same building, and then that's an environment where everyone's competing with each other for the tenants. You know what I mean? Like there's, so many other comparable units. And of course, in those markets, the landlords just wait because it's a tight rental market, and eventually that inventory clears because we have a tight rental market. It's not like you just drop your price in that scenario. But in a market like today, when you're selling, yeah, you could get an above average number of people who are listing to sell. Most people don't do that for tax reasons, for all sorts of reasons. Also because they wanted to keep it as an investment, but because the way rates are, yeah, you could see a higher number of units being listed for sale in a newly completed building for the exact same reason these people are listing because the numbers just don't work for them. It's just, the cash flow is not there when you're paying 6+% on your mortgage payment.
Right. And interestingly enough, John, for our second question, it's actually a bundle of questions. We're kind of hearing from consumers on the flip side. So, because we are starting to see news headlines and also some reports from analysts like yourself about more motivated sellers in some circumstances due to the conditions you were just talking about, we just heard about from the first question above. This has led to several people writing in to ask us whether it's a good time for those who do have some cash and we're kind of sitting on the sidelines to start thinking about investing in the market. And what we're getting a lot, I think the common question is the concern that is it really safe to go ahead and start investing if because the fear is that prices might really start to slide down and they haven't yet. And because we're not really seeing a let up or any sign that we're going to get out of this uncertain economic situation we're in right now of high interest rates.
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. And yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a bit of an interesting dynamic because you can kind of see two things going on at once. I mean, obviously some investors exiting the market because just debt loads are too high, payments are too high. Other investors who are cash rich, quite frankly, and sitting on cash and looking to invest. And sometimes when I talk to people who are not in this business, they think, well, why would you invest? It's a slow, to your point, like it's a slowing market. Might prices dip a little bit more? I mean, the reality is you're never going to time the bottom. I mean, there's that classic saying from, Warren Buffett, the best time. What does it say? It's the best time to be greedy is when other people are fearful, and you want to be fearful when other people are greedy. So certainly, I mean, I've been having conversations with my own like investor clients, and 100% there's like potential. And I'll say, like, to your question, I think when we talk about the concerns about prices falling further, and I think I'll kind of bundle it into two categories. I mean, if you're thinking about, for example, buying condominium assignments, if that is your thing, then yeah, 100%. It might be too early. Like, I think there's probably still a lot of pressure and potential distress because condo prices, I don't think resale prices are not going to go up anytime soon. The market, the inventory's building, there's pressure on prices, which means next year's completions are also going to be a little bit distressed, because not only will those people have a hard time getting financing a year from now, their units might not even be worth in the resale market what they paid for them, right? So this creates a whole other type of distress. So yeah, I mean, if that's your thing, maybe you can wait. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about investment. If you see a perfect assignment and you want to live in it, I mean, I wouldn't time the market. If it's a unique unit, but purely as an investment, yeah, maybe there's no rush there. The space that I'm seeing and the clients that I'm working with are a little bit different. It's kind of more in the low-rise market. And, in the low-rise market, it's quite different. It's not like, the investors I work with, I don't work with tons of investors. I keep a small pool we share similar views. You know what I mean? We look at the market. I mean, you'll never see me lining up with another 150 agents trying to buy pre-construction condos, for example, at $1,800 a square foot. That is not kind of the type of investing my clients do. They're generally looking at long-term investment. They're not trying to make a quick buck. They're not trying to make an easy 200 grand a year by flipping a condominium that's pre-construction. They actually they like me. They like real estate. They want to find value. They want to buy properties that they think are good long-term investments. And 100%, I'd say in that market, there is value now because there are just certain types of properties that people are not buying because they don't have capital, right? So, without getting into specifics, my clients are not looking at the nicely staged home that's going to still get 4 or 5 offers because it's perfect and it's beautiful. They're looking at the properties that no one else is looking at and no one else is interested, maybe because they need a lot of work. there's a lot of land value, but no one's investing for land value now. They don't have the capital to kind of play sort of these longer term investment games. And those types of properties, certainly, I think there's room for it. I mean, might they go down a little bit further? Sure. But the point, I think, with these types of clients, like there's not so many, it's not like pre-construction condos where everyone's just trying to sell you whatever. And there's like so much inventory and agents are trying to push whatever deal there is. With these types of assets, there's not that many properties that come up every month, for example. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't take on tons of clients, because it's like unique properties. You have to, you're like mining for gold. You're looking for unique opportunities that have potential. There's not tons of them. So if you see them, it's not about timing the bottom. It's like seeing value in today's prices and today's rates and kind of making that investment. So I say certainly for the right investor, even in this market, even if the market might dip a little bit further, the clients I speak with don't really care about timing it, because they say flat out, they're like holding for 10 plus years. You know what I mean? And they're looking at long-term value. So definitely, I say there's still space in this market where there are properties that are great value that no one's looking at because people don't have capital. So if you have cash, you're sitting on cash. I mean, that cash is king in sluggish markets right now.
A lot to think about. Yeah. No, I think that was very useful. And I think our viewers will find that to be useful. We're going to move now to question 3. Hi, Realosophy, John and Urmi. I just want to say that you've done an amazing job with your platform for finding opportunities as well as education, especially your insightful comments that are real and actionable for the individual. Keep it up. Thank you. I do have a question for you. In summary, it relates to the risk of going from a starter bungalow home to a larger home for my growing family, given the current market conditions. We currently live in a bungalow in Etobicoke in Toronto near the Queensway. We are looking to upsize in the same area. I think our current home is in the 1.3 to 1.4 million range. We are looking to purchase in the 3 million range. I believe that between the sale of our home and some additional cash we would have about 2.9 million to fund the purchase of a $3 million house. We have $240,000 mortgage. We have a $240. Let's start again. We have a $240,000 mortgage, and we may need to go up to $450,000 to cover transaction and moving costs, but we can handle this amount at these interest rates. The issue is that my wife does not want to sell our home before purchasing a new home, and the 1.2 million I'm estimating from the sale of our bungalow is not a sure thing in a cooling market. So what is the best way to mitigate the risk of buying before selling in a slowing market? If your buying budget is based on assumptions about what you will sell for, would a longer closing date for the purchase help? And what else would you suggest? Best, Bertrand.
Wow, that's a great question, and I think very timely in a slowing market. So I think before I answer the question, I think I'm going to unpack sort of the decisions that homeowners need to make when they need to time 2 transactions. And at a high level, give everyone the kind of pros and cons of both, because I think that might unpack Bertrand's question. So if you own a home and you want to say upsize, I mean, there are kind of 2 ways to go about it. The first is you sell your current home first, you lock in what price you're getting. Once you have that done, you maybe try to negotiate a long closing date to give yourself time to find the next home you want to move into, right? The positive with that is, exactly what price you're getting for your home. You're not motivated to sell. You're not rushed to sell. There's no uncertainty with respect to the sale price of your home, right? The downside to that strategy is if you don't find a home you like, where do you go? You have to rent potentially in the short term. And this is, of course, a higher risk if you're looking for a very unique home in a particular area and it doesn't come up very often. Like if only 1 or 2 homes come up, every few months, you're going to have a hard time finding a home, right? So those are kind of the pros and cons of selling first and then buying. If you do a Bertrand thing, which is kind of wait for the home to come up on the market and buy it and then sell your current home, the positive to that, of course, is, again, if you're kind of particular, you want to be in a specific area, you don't, and it doesn't come up very often, and you don't want to have this hassle of moving to a rental if you sell first, then it's great because you wait for the perfect home to come up, you buy it, you potentially move in, and then you sell your current home. Or maybe you don't move in, you just sell your current home. Now, the downsides to that is, I mean, there's kind of two potential downsides. Number one, and the most important question is, does he needs to sell his current home, okay, in order to finance the purchase of the new one, okay? Or can he afford to finance the new one without necessarily selling it, even though he wants to, right? And this is an important question from like a financing perspective, right? Because if this ultimately determines how much pressure you're under to sell, if the bank says to you, no, you have to sell your home, like you cannot afford to have two homes at once, even if the one's listed for sale, you have to sell your current home. Well, if he goes out and buys, and even if he has a long closing date of say 90 days, right, or 120 days, one way or another, you have to sell that home. And it doesn't matter if the market's terrible or the prices are falling, you're kind of like a distressed seller. When prices fell, so just as an example, in 2022, when the market slowed down, the average price of a home peaked at about 1.7 million in February of 2022. And the market slowed down because the Bank of Canada started raising rates, buyers pulled out of the market, but a lot of people had bought first and then needed to sell. They were effectively distressed sellers because when they listed their home and weren't getting a lot of showings or weren't getting offers on offer night, or the offer on the offer night was 100 grand less than they budgeted, they had to take it. They had no option because they needed to sell, right? And this is actually why home prices in 2022 went from 1.7 million on an average to 1.3 in the matter of 4 or 5 months. And they plummeted that quickly again because people were distressed. They had to sell, right? So if you have to sell, you're under a lot of pressure. And you know, I'll give you one anecdote actually. It was wild. I met with a family in my neighborhood, Leslieville. They bought a home in, I think, the suburbs somewhere. They did not have their own agent. They just worked with the listing agents, that's the seller's agents, to make the offer. And the seller's agent negotiated the offer on the home that they're buying, but also told them they could sell their Leslieville home for just under 1.6 million. And, you know, after sitting on the market for a month with that agent at 1.6 million, you know, they reached out to me they're considering switching agents, their home's not selling, they want an opinion. And it was challenging because, you know, I went in and I'm like, your home's not worth 1.6 million. Like, I hate to say it, like maybe 1.3, you know what I mean? And you know, obviously that news didn't go over well. And again, they just gradually reduced their price and they ended up selling for just under 1.3, I think it was, or something like that. So they sold for about $300,000 less than what they budgeted for, right? So, and now here's the thing, if you're that seller in that situation, number one, let's just say that happens before you take possession of your new home, right? Which, if you have to sell your current home, the sale has to happen before you take possession of the new home, right? You have to have sold. You don't have to have closed, but you have to have sold. The first question is, well, do they now even have enough money to buy the new home? Because like in this couple's example that I'm giving, they sold for 300, they're getting 300,000 less than they had budgeted for, right? So is their income high enough to cover an additional 300,000 in mortgage debt, which is, you know, in today's market, like 1,800 bucks a month. So, and if they can't afford that, then they're defaulting on the home that they just bought, right? And that is the biggest risk, actually. And this is why people who buy first and sell in some ways are distressed sellers, because if they don't sell and come up with the money, they default on the home that they purchased. So they kind of lose that deposit and can get sued by the seller if the seller ends up selling the home for less than what they bought it for. So there are a lot of risks associated with buying first and selling in a closing market. And I think, yeah, so those are the key things that you need to be worried about. Now, if this reader can afford, whatever it is, 1.5 million in debt, which would basically mean he doesn't need to sell this home. He just has to, even though he wants to, he can afford to own 2 homes at once. Then there's less pressure on you as a seller. You don't have to fire sale your home. It's not like you're going to default on the home that you just purchased if you can't sell your current home. It doesn't guarantee you're going to get the price you want. And I think that was his original question, right? If I buy my next home and I'm budgeting to sell for 1.2, what if I don't get 1.2? There's no way to mitigate that risk, because when you buy first and then sell, you're just, again, leaving yourself open to what is happening in the current market dynamics, right? And again, if the market is slowing, it's slowing. I mean, the only thing I'll say to mitigate that risk is that, before you buy, you have to look at what's going on in the neighborhood and for the home that you're buying and the home that you're selling. Like, I remember in 2022, when the market was slowing, at 2022 and in 2017, because we had 2 dips, like the market was slowing down, and and our clients were still active, and they would want to bid on homes on offer nights, as the market's cooling, and they're excited because, this home only got 2 offers on offer night, we get a chance to win it, and our comments were like, yeah, okay, it's great, maybe you're going to get it, but like, that is not good news for your sale. Like, if the market is slowing down so much and these homes that used to get 10 and 15 offers are only getting 2, it tells you you're gonna have a lot harder time when you go to sell your home, right? And fortunately, most of our clients had no problems. They sold, we moved on, but this is the pressure that you're in if you basically buy first and then you sell. You're effectively a distressed seller in most cases if you need to sell your current home. And the only thing that you can do, like I said, is you will see the market slowing down. Your agent should tell you the market's cooling. You're not going to get 1.2. This bungalow just sold last week for 1.1. So you need to adjust your budget and probably assume you're getting less than what the current market value is. And I think that's, I'd say, the best way to mitigate the risk is just base your assumptions on a lower value than what the current prices are. And obviously that's not what you're going to try to sell for. You're going to try to maximize the price. But again, you got to plan for the worst case scenario. And as long as you can afford, say, you were getting 1 million instead of 1.2 and still be able to carry that new home, then yeah, I mean, that's kind of potentially your worst case scenario. You know what I mean? But I think there aren't too many ways to mitigate it if you bought and you need to sell, because you're a distressed seller potentially in a market that's very slow. And I think it's good to do your research ahead of time and kind of know the risks before you commit to buying. That's a long answer to that question.
Well, it's a very important consideration. I mean, so John, it seems to me a theme here is getting used to market conditions that we haven't seen in the Toronto area for a sustained amount of period. We saw dips in 2008 after the subprime crisis in the US. We saw dips because of COVID, and we saw a temporary investor-led bubble dip in the suburbs of Toronto in 2017, which you wrote about extensively. But what we haven't seen is a sustained environment where there are high rates, slowing market, uncertainty, sales are way down, number of sales are way down.
Yeah.
And in that market, we need to start to think a little differently. So what do you think about Bertrand's, I suspect Bertrand's question about the longer closing period almost has to do with a different era in which, okay, it gives me more time to find the right buyer for my home.
Yeah, exactly.
But is that really the case in the kind of market conditions we're seeing? I think you're saying something differently, that every week you're on market in a cooling market, that could mean substantial revisions to what you might sell for.
I mean, Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're in a market where prices are falling, right? If we go back to 2022, prices, average prices were falling about 100,000 every month. So like taking longer to sell in that market doesn't help you, right? Um, because I mean, the value of your home potentially is declining the longer you wait. Um, but in a normal market, yes, in a normal market that like, a year ago, whatever, when even when the market is stable and prices are stable, rates are fine, it's not just tons of bidding wars. Yeah, like homes sell 30 days in Toronto, you know what I mean? Like, so the risk's usually a lot lower. But like you said, in this market, you're less certain and you don't know. Like, again, I think the challenge is going to be the longer rates stay above 6%, we're probably going to see, say, like sales. I think I mentioned my last webinar, the live update for low rise homes, like detached homes, were the lowest for the month of August they've been since 1998. I mean, think about that. Like, and that obviously accounts for the fact that August is a slow month, because if you compare all Augusts, last month the lowest in over 20 years. You can't predict what's going to happen. We can't predict how many sellers are going to start listing if, again, they're financially stretched, right? So it's a challenge either way. There are no perfect answers. And I think, you just have to mitigate risk as much as possible, I'd say, in this environment. And the other thing is, of course, it's very regional, and we've talked about this, right? Like you can't look at what's going on in the GTA as a whole, right? Like you need to look at what's going on in your neighborhood for the type of home you're buying and the type of home you're selling. Like some neighborhoods, even in a slowing market, are still going to sell well. Like some homes that are like the nice home, the premium lot, something unique about it is still going to sell more quickly, even in a slower market, right? So again, sometimes it is, specific to the home and to the area.
Thanks, John. So certainly this is a time to stop and consider a lot more. And I really want to thank our viewers, both on our YouTube channel and our podcast listeners, for sending in such fantastic questions. Please keep them coming. Ask John at movesmartly.com to send in your own questions for consideration on having us talk about it on our monthly show, or we will try to find another opportunity on our channel to talk about it. John mentioned his monthly webinar, which is a live monthly update where viewers can also ask their own questions. So you can find all of that content and more on our Move Smartly channels. John, if somebody has a more in-depth situation or really wants to basically start to seek advice, more professional advice from an agent, they can contact you. What's the best way?
They can sign up for consultation, movesmartly.com/meet John, or send me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com as well.
Excellent. So you can see links to all of these things in our show notes. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for watching and viewing.